Thank you. Kia ora koutou, no mai haere mai ki tēnei hui. That's in Māori, the native language of New Zealand, just saying hello, everyone, and welcome to this meeting. My name is Tony Bruce, as Diane just said, and I'm the moderator for today. So in this slide, we want to introduce our main speakers. So Andrea Casca-Shepherd, Mudatambi, who's often called Ntambi Ravele, and Rubian Kagawan. So each speaker is going to speak about a different topic related to being innovators and protectors of women in sport. And just a couple of housekeeping things. If you want to, if a question comes up while we're starting, just make sure you use the chat function to ask any questions for the speakers. I will keep an eye on the chat and I'll invite you to ask your question using your online name. But if you prefer me to ask the question for you, just write Tony Ask in your question and I will actually check at various points and ask your question for you. Mute yourself, please, unless you're asking a question. Each speaker, we're giving loosely about 30 minutes to tell their story, share their knowledge, and answer any questions that you might have for them. And there should be some time at the end for more questions. And so I would like to start by introducing Andrea Casca-Shepherd. She's an international lawyer and arbitrator, and she's originally from Slovakia. She oversees management of global legal matters and strategies, advises on new and existing laws, and provides worldwide legal and ethical compliance for the world's largest integrated well-being company, Workplace Options. And this company provides services in 200 countries. Andrea has degrees in both common law and civil law, and she's practiced in the United States, Canada, and Europe. She's a multilingual speaker, currently based in the United States, and she is a board member of WomenSport International. Over to you, Andrea.
Thank you very much, Tony. Thank you for this kind introduction. It's a real pleasure to be here and share our knowledge for each of us as a woman innovators and leaders in our own disciplines. And as Tony said, I'm someone who has a global overview and practice, interacting daily with hundreds of jurisdictions, and in fact, with 50% of Fortune 500 companies. So in my daily life, I am in a commercial side as a corporate lawyer. On my heart side, and what I do all my life is being engaged as a sport volunteer, and I would say nowadays also a leader, and being now on the board of Women in Sports International and also other organizations. My kind of a highlight in my sport law career was participating as arbitrators at Rio Olympic Games. It was really something very exciting, and that really kind of even made me more ignited in doing work in sports as a volunteer and a leader. So our topic is to forecast, to show you how we are protecting integrity in sport. And I would say, if I make a comparison, there is ESG, environmental, social, and governance initiatives very prominent in global business. It is something every board, everyone is concerned in order to protect sustainability in the business. And what I'm really pleasantly surprised, we see these initiatives for sustainability not only in a business, but we see it in all kinds of sport-related organizations, whether it's officials, whether it's teams, whether it's volunteer organizations. Everyone is embracing this new concept, and that's a kind of a new trend I'm seeing. And that really also speaks very directly to not only sustainability, but to integrity, which is kind of a keystone of sustainability. We need to have, in order for us to have a sustainable scenario, the clean sport, has to be there on all levels. So governance is, in my view, key, and who is at the center of governance, who is in the heart of these organizations. It's absolutely crucial. So governance, ethics, and integrity, I can see as a pillars of sustainability in sports. Next. So for those practicing in different areas of law, we see that there are lots of different crimes which directly or indirectly relate to sport and sport organizations. And we see this tension in the world between clean sport and sport crimes. Now, there are many ideals, Olympic ideals, we are living it, but there is still a lot of cleanup for us leaders, women, and also, no gender, regardless of gender and regardless of a profession to do. And we have to be very focused in our efforts, because there could be a lots of wrongdoing. There are bad apples who come up and try to tarnish our ideals. So there are different types of crimes, and as I outlined on this slide, but I cannot really focus on all of them. So I would be talking and a little bit focusing on crimes against person, and then also a little bit touching on corruption from what I see, how it is being addressed in a corporate setting, and how I see it could be also addressed better in the sports setting. And that kind of corruption is and bribery, those are like crimes against society, but also crimes against public health and welfare. So in terms of corruption, if you can go to the next slide, what we see in a business, what we see in the business is that we are trying to clean up not only locally, but also globally. And in the US, Tony mentioned, sorry, I'm in the 6 o'clock in the morning, so just waking up my little voice. We are based in the United States, and we have, as many of you know, Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. So there is a lot of effort to include and address corruption not only locally, but it's also on the global scale, and the law protects against all kinds of wrongdoing in that sense. So in the US, that kind of vehicle can be also used to combat corruption when it comes to the public officials, and it can influence all kinds of organizations. What I'm really impressed about, there's this global overview of anti-bribery laws. I don't know whether we can see it on the camera, but it's a fantastic compendium that one of the law firms, one of the prominent law firms put out. And we can definitely look into this as a source of, what kind of enforcements are there, and not only what our laws and enforcements are in different jurisdictions from Europe, Asia, they have EMEA, Asia Pacific, Latin America, but also there are also suggestions on kind of protective mechanisms which could be used, and for financial controls or risk controls in different countries, and what is recommended. So there's a lot of literature coming up which can be helping from business. Again, I'm drawing this parallel from the business to the sports. So definitely policies, procedures, audits, financial controls are absolutely crucial. And I know there are for sure sessions which are digging into these details. But again, there might be a local, in each jurisdiction, in each culture, you might have to have this set up a little bit differently in order to be effective in addressing clean sport and clean business culture. Again, I'm coming back to my main, what I'm convinced of is that we can do a lot of controls, or we can do a lot of study and enforcement, but for sustainability, for long term, we really need a very strong tone from the top, and that means from the leaders in the sports organizations, sports businesses, officials, referees, and all entourage which is available there. So when I was reflecting about it, I'm thinking that integrity of sports, as I said, is also including harassment and abuse. I showed you at the beginning the crimes against person, and that could be crime, could be abuse. Definitely, that's so. I'm seeing now lots of trends in harassment and abuse where it is taken kind of like a separately. In my view, and I've been working on this topic from 2013, it is that basically clean sport, prevention of harassment and abuse, it is part of the integrity of sport, and it's very speaking very loudly. This example, how much in global sport we can make an improvement. When I started to advocate in this area as a member of IOC group for prevention of harassment and abuse, I met leaders who have been working in this area 15, 20 years. They were fighting the system. They were very brave individuals. Nowadays, we are seeing top conferences in the best fora. We are seeing a financial support for clean sport and safe sport. So it is phenomenal how leadership and funds and all that can help in the integrity aspect. So I kind of like wanted to sum up all I have seen on my end from harassment and abuse. I'm not academic, I don't speak very much, but I wanted to, from the point of view of a global leader and lawyer, I wanted to do something where I would state my conclusions on the topic of harassment and abuse and leadership in sports. And I have authored the article with a student who had a summer summer student, and she was very helpful law student, also doing research. And we have published the role of the general counsel, meaning director in the prevention of harassment and abuse in international sport. That was for the publication, which Global Athletics or World Athletics actually edited. They had the other articles related to this topic, and it was really a great opportunity to speak to this. And what I can say about the experience of writing this article is it really crystallized my absolute conviction that again that not only the directors, executives, but also lawyers globally can play a huge role in integrity of sports. They have years of top directors and sport personalities, and they can influence really the course of the events. And I really was very pleasantly not surprised, but I really take it as a big sign that I'm on the right track when I got the recognition from the lecturer at Harvard Law School, saying, that this was really the right kind of a direction. And he worked as a Ben Heinemann. He worked as a general counsel for Jack Welch for General Electrics. That was one of the most. Jack Welch was one of the most famous CEOs in the history in the U.S. So the sport and again corporate parallel speaks to me very very strongly. What I'm proposing in the article, I can share it if someone would be interested after this speech. But I'm going to the background, to the history. I am also addressing exactly how to handle alleged incidents, how we have to be really careful, when this come, when we are doing independent investigation, especially when there are allegations of harassment, abuse against top managers or any managers, and there is a conflict of interest, when we have to really pull the trigger as lawyers and go for independent investigations. And also on preventive strategies, how we can prevent this kind of wrongdoing occurring in our organization or workplace. So it kind of provides a little bit of a guide or a guideline how to go about it. And very important in global aspect is you cannot be willfully blind. You have to really act every day very quickly, zero tolerance, swift action, I would say, and a local global approach. Even we have to also very quickly see whether in terms of some situation like this, which is a lack of integrity, whether it's harassment or abuse or anything else, whether we are dealing, I have to immediately diagnose whether I'm dealing with single incident or whether there is a series of incidents, whether one person is implicated, whether we have a many people who may be implicated. And my responsibility is to keep the organization clean and safe and that's why I say the women leaders, women lawyers have a lot to do. There are lots of been done in safe sport, but I think there are other areas, where we need to take leadership and integrity and clean sport. Just in a general, is in my view, there is lots to be done, and I'm really absolutely delighted that we had this sport integrity session, and that this week of like brainstorming and thinking about sport integrity exists, because I really personally felt there was a gap and need and void for someone to step in on this in global scale and have leaders like our panel from Women in Sports International to speak to these issues. So I think, Tony, summarize my thoughts on this kind of aspect. And I think I will then turn this back to you, let others to speak to maybe other aspects of this important topic.
Thank you very much, Andrew. And someone who's on the Zoom is not muted. So just everybody check that if you're not actually speaking that you are muted. I'm just going to check the chat and see if anybody's posted anything. Not that I can see so far. All right. So I'd like to introduce our next speaker, who's Mudintambi, often called Ntambi Ravele. She's a groundbreaker and a leader in women in sport, involved across the world, as well as in her home nation of South Africa. In 1996, she initiated the formation of Women in Sport South Africa, and in 2008, she founded and is still the chair of the South African Women and Sport Foundation. She was a founding member of the Africa Women Sport Network, and she's also a former president of Netball South Africa and a former board member of World Netball. She was the first and only woman to be appointed chair of the Boxing South Africa board, which is an historically male-dominated sport. Her other current and former board involvements include wheelchair tennis, cricket, community safety, Brand South Africa, regional tourism, sports science, the Laureus Sport for Good South Africa, and WomenSport International. And she's a former PE teacher turned businesswoman. She's managing director of The Journey Marketing, and she was the local organising committee chair for the 2023 ICC Women's Cricket T20 series for the Seniors and Under-19 World Cup. And she's served in many other important leadership roles. So she brings a very global and diverse background to our talks today. So the floor is yours, Ntambi. If you can unmute in case you're accidentally muted.
Okay.
Yes.
Sorry about that. Thank you very much, and morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are. Well, thank you for joining us. So, as Tony had said in my introduction, who I am, you would see how I'm addressing this topic that it's following. And Tony, if you could just go to the next slide. I think, okay. Is there a slide before that?
No, that was
okay.
That was the first one you gave me.
Slide, yeah. Okay. Okay, fine. So the issue that I want to address and using actually the research which was done in the Southern African countries in 2021 on gender participation and leadership, and also gender distribution amongst board members. So what we have here is the fact that in the national sports councils, we have 41% representation of women, whilst men 58.3%. And in the Olympic committees, you'll find that it's 27.7%, whilst men are 72.7. So you see the inequalities in that level, but also the inequality. It's not only at representation. Is the fact that there's no female president of the Olympic Committee in the whole region. And by the way, Southern African countries, we are talking about almost like 14 countries in the south of Africa. Next slide. So rights and the gender equality and election, and I think one of the things that we look at and integrity usually, it's more on the field of play, but there's much happening within boards and committees. And women, I don't think we want to be elected because of we were women. We want to be elected because of we have credentials, the right credentials to be in that leadership. And if you listen from Tony's introduction, my credentials are far much wider in sport, in such a way that there are very few men who could actually challenge those credentials. Next slide. So the issue that I want us to talk about is about the treatment of women during elections, and especially elections in multi-coded sports. But I think also it happens also in other positions in federations, where there's a lot of unfair and lack of integrity, especially at a level of decision-making positions. And most of that happens because of, the males that are serving with us at that level. Can you move to next slide?
Yes.
Okay. So I would actually, at the moment, just tell you the story of what happened with the elections. So in South Africa, we were going through elections for the Olympic Committee, and what happened, the fact that the process of those elections were showing ethical, moral principles when positioning themselves for elections. So I was approached by the vice president of our association. By then I was serving in tennis, to say to me, Ntambi, there are so many problems in our organization, in our Olympic Committee. Why don't you stand for elections with your credentials? So I agreed. I said, no, that's fine. I agreed to stand for election with the support of the federation. And then what happened is that the elections were postponed. But in between the elections postponed and then the next elections, I then identify something which was a conflict of interest with the president of the federation, which is tennis. So I raised the issue where I was questioning the fact that we can't have the president of the federation being the chair of the disciplinary committee, because of if there's a dispute, where do we escalate it to? So possibly we need to look for an independent chair, or the vice president should be the chair. And I think that the president was not happy with that. But then when the nominations came back again, when I was nominated, what happened is that he agreed, they agreed, the board agreed. But what happened is that between the acting president of the Olympic Committee and our president of tennis, they had a discussion about nominations. And in discussing the nominations, I don't know what they discussed, but the evidence that I then have of lack of integrity and actually an ethical issue was the fact that the president of tennis then sent an email to all other board members discrediting me as an individual, that I don't qualify, and the fact that he had a meeting with the acting president of the Olympic Committee, and the acting president said, I don't have any skills in sport, and I won't be the right president. But in that email, I was not included in the email. And that's where the trick came in. So one of the board members then came to me and said, but who is this person who was discrediting you? So she didn't know this person. So I said, where did you see it? He then said, in the email. I said, I didn't see the email. And then thereafter, she sent me the email. So immediately thereafter, then I then actually raised an issue with both the Olympic Committee and my own federation. And the issue was taken by the Olympic Committee. They suspended the acting president and investigated the issue. And then we went for arbitration. And during arbitration, the president of tennis refused to go for arbitration, but he came to give evidence. But the arbitrator didn't allow us to respond to his presentation. And immediately thereafter, I realized that so many games played around the whole issue. The legal team from the Olympic Committee, they were also playing other games where they were not following the procedures. And I knew then that I'm going to lose the case. But I didn't actually withdrew from the case because of one of the things that I wanted to do was to raise awareness of what happens during elections, that people sometimes lose their moral principles and they become unethical. And again, at the end, it actually affects the integrity of the organization and of the individuals. So when we were going through that process, I allowed the process to go through until the end. And at the end, there were areas where they were fined not having not followed the rules because of there was evidence of the email. But the acting president was saying, no, I never said that. And then the president of tennis was saying, no, it was not in that meeting, it was whatever, but we never discussed that. So there was so much around the issue in such a way that the truth didn't come out at the end. But what I was happy about is the fact that there was an email, and in the email, there was a statement that the vice president, the acting president said this, and the president of tennis excluded me in that email. So at the end of the case, I decided to resign from Tennis South Africa. But in the process also, I've written a letter to the international body so that they should know, what leadership we are having in the organization. So I resigned from Tennis South Africa, but elections and they came back to me to say they've opened the elections now. If I'm willing to stand for elections, I should stand for elections. At the moment, at that time, I decided not to even stand for those elections because of it was obvious that I'm going to lose because I never had time to actually contact people to vote for me. And this whole issue was actually an issue that put me also in a bad spot as a sports administrator. So I didn't stand for elections, and the elections went on, and the gentleman won the elections because by then he went on unopposed. And why I challenge the issue is the issue around patriarchy, and especially in Africa, where some, and I wouldn't say all men are like that, some men don't want to be led by women. And this issue, it's an issue that is affecting us in sport. And I don't know whether the reason why we don't even have a president of the Olympic Committee in the whole region, it's part of those issues. And I think women are going through these challenges without talking about it. And I decided to talk about it. And that's why I challenged it. But also the issue around culture, which I think we need to deal with. But also one of the things that I was in my mind, when I was challenging the issue, unfortunately, most of women were calling me and talking to me, but not becoming publicly supporting because they were afraid. And again, they see me as being a leader and a Women in Sport Foundation chairperson being treated like that, and they were actually worried about their leadership in sport. So I was doing it to lead the way so that women, they shouldn't allow themselves to find themselves in an injustice situation and keep quiet. And I don't want other women to experience it. So the learning or the take home out of this whole issue and the case, because it was all over the media in the country, is that it taught most of sports administrators not to be unethical during elections. And if they have to discuss issues, they have to discuss issues openly and not actually go to a level of integrity. Next slide. So my recommendation to women is for them not to be quiet. But also, I think to other organizations like SIGA, I would want us to jointly have a program on awareness program so that women should know their rights when they serve in these structures. But also, I think one of the areas is capacity building for women and an advocacy training. So what I did about this particular issue is the fact that we started running now leadership training for women who are future leaders, so that they should understand that in serving in these structures, it's not that easy, and it's not the fact that you see me on TV, you think things are smooth. Things are difficult, so we do run the training and make sure that they would understand that there is discrimination issues around leadership. And also, again, looking around the advocacy to say you need to advocate If you see injustice, you should make sure that you are not part of it. You should be able to challenge it, because if you don't challenge it, you are actually also a part of the people who are creating those injustice situation. So that's the way that me and my team are trying now to learn from my experience, and then say, how do we make sure that future leaders are not going through the same experience? And if they're going through the same experience, what are the processes that they should follow? And one of the programs that we also run is around mentorship, because we would want to support women whenever they have those challenges, and make sure that we mentor them to do the right thing instead of running away from sport. So thank you, and then I just thought I should share my story and how we are trying to come up with solutions in those situations. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ntambe. And now we're going to hear from Ruby-Ann Kagawan. So she is currently the Asia and Oceania president of CONIFA, which is the Confederation of Independent Football Associations. This is an international sport organization that sits outside FIFA. And almost 1 billion people worldwide belong to the organization. And what it does is gives groups, nations, and territories a chance to play football at the international level who would otherwise not have this chance. And Ruby very recently organized and led the first CONIFA Asia Cup in August 2023. So well done, Ruby. I'm sure you're feeling a bit exhausted at the moment. Ruby's currently on a full scholarship from the Erasmus Mundus Joint Master's Degree Program, which is one of the really prestigious global master's programs. Her focus is on the governance and administration of leisure and sport, and that it's called GOALS, and her specialization is leisure, sport, and event management. And we look forward to hearing your story, Ruby.
Thank you very much, Tony. If we can go to the next slide. I started my quest for sport integrity in 2014, and I've traveled 4 continents just to find a global platform for my voice, because my voice was ignored in my country. And then the pandemic hit, and that was a blessing in disguise in my case, because that's when I started networking digitally through LinkedIn, and I got into the sport integrity global movement. So let me first start with how I became a whistleblower. I wanted to bring world championships to my country because we have the perfect weather, the perfect topography, and I felt this will create jobs, thousands of jobs, and turn our country from developing to an advanced nation in a few years. But when I started talking about a world championship for a particular sport, the people were evasive. The tycoons didn't care. This is just a drop in the bucket for them, and it would generate millions of euros for the nation. And that started my quest to understand what's happening. And I stumbled into a Pandora's box for this particular sport, because it was full of abuses, corruption, and deaths, since the sport is a high-risk sport. So there's a whole big, what we call Black Federation or non-sanctioned federation that emerged because the National Federation is so corrupt. It's a one-man show. And through my alumni network, I was a scholar of a private university, which they consider the best in the country. So the graduates there, they go up to the high positions of government and the corporate world. And within 2 months, I got to the bottom of things. This person that I investigated, the president of a national federation, had been around at that time for more than 20 years. And it was all fake papers that he used. no general elections. And the sad thing here is how he used women to get his ways done. And in particular, he was bringing prostitutes to the events, and he was using prostitutes to hold the men under his control. So the web got bigger and bigger, and I found out how the best athlete for this sport from our country died needlessly because there was no safety check. So when I looked into the National Olympic Committee, it's all tied to the politics of the country. And it was an oligarchy for 3 decades. So I felt that there needed to be a change in government. And behind the scenes, I worked towards the change of the government for our country. So they were supposed to be allies, but just to cut the long story short, there was still betrayal. The difficult thing for them is that they could not handle the fact that the ones trying to help them, the person trying to help them, is a woman. It's a male-dominated sport, and they were full of complaints about the abuses of the National Federation president, who turns out to be actually a bogus president, but none of them did anything. Instead, they just created non-sanctioned associations without any safety for the athletes. So at that point, there was a exchange deal wherein just before I was going to have an international federation accreditation, my national accreditation was revoked in exchange for a ticket or a license to participate in an Asian sport event. So my context is Asia. And this brings me to some details that I would like to share with you. The voice of Asia is not so much heard, and more so the voice of women from Asia. So in this slide, I want to highlight from a whistleblower, I became an advocate of sport integrity, gender equality, and human rights in sport. And when my report, which I brought to Switzerland, reached other agencies like law enforcement agencies, since the International Sport Federation did not do anything about my report, did not investigate the person that I investigated and reported on. And when I wrote the leaders of my country, they were ignoring my reports, because for them, the priority is poverty alleviation and not sport. I brought my report to law enforcement agencies internationally, and they all say the same thing: I must leave my country before they could do anything, because there is a high risk to my life. And true enough, it's easy for them to, for the people to be hired to do extrajudicial killings in my country for as low as $100. That's the cost of life there. So when I looked into being a political asylee, it was really difficult because I wouldn't be able to work or study until I get the accreditation of the government. So what I did during those years, by the way, my country had the longest lockdown. So we were basically just within the village or within our communities or indoor. I studied. I took certificate courses with scholarships, with full scholarships, one after the other, until someone sent me a link, and this is on the Erasmus Mundus scholarship, and I was actually still finishing a certificate of advanced studies in one of my schools. So before the Erasmus, I was a student of the European University Institute, which is Florence-based, and also the University of Lausanne. So I did this link, I applied, finished my application in 5 days with recommendations from my professors from University of Lausanne, and I got in. And this is the Erasmus Mundus joint master's degree in the governance and administration of leisure and sport. And who would have thought that I would get to this point The acceptance rate is 4 or 5% amidst a big applicant pool. So I became one of the pioneer students of this Erasmus Mundus program in sport management and a full scholar. I also got involved with the WomenSport International and the Confederation of Independent Football Association. Both organizations I got to know through SIGA, the Sport Integrity Global Alliance. And it's a volunteer. And in the case of CONIFA, I just moved up and became unanimously elected to be the president of Asia and Oceania. And within 11 months, there were only 2 football associations in the Asia Confederation. It became 9 from representing less than 12 million people. CONIFA Asia now represents close to 400 million people. And after 10 years of talking about an Asia Cup from the previous administration, I took a step forward, being here in the European Union, to initiate the Asia Cup. Why is the Asia Cup in Europe? Because we are dealing with diaspora, refugee, migrant communities, and sport isolated nations, and they're all over the world. In fact, for the Asia Cup, I had footballers coming from 4 continents, and it was a very successful, beyond our imagination, success for the tournament, and that opened a portal for Asian footballers to be known. And it wasn't an easy experience still, even though CONIFA is egalitarian in its leadership. We are dealing with cultures, Asian cultures, that really are uncomfortable with having women in leadership. So let me delve into that more. Next slide, please. So this is our football tournament in Portugal, Montijo, and if as you can see, I'm the only woman there. And it was very good that I had men who were the leaders, who accepted my leadership over a men's sport or men's tournament. However, from the Asian context, just to come to this point, as I mentioned, we have 9 football associations, but there were associations that withdrew on 2 reasons. One was they couldn't think that a woman would know how to handle or organize a football event. That was one. And the other one is because I made a stand against racism and discrimination, because I admitted one football association where there was conflict territorially in another football association. So I made a stand against racism, discrimination, gender bias, and upheld human rights in sport. One of the things that made people think that I don't know what I'm doing in this leadership position is my gender. So let's go to the next slide. This is a SIGA study, and as we can see, there are women executives in 31 of the largest federations. But let's see the numbers. So there are 545 members of the executive committee, and of which 147 are female. So that's less than 30%. That's 26.9. That's still a minority. Of these leaders, there are 3 chair, 23 vice presidents, and 5 secretaries general. So let's get deeper. Who are these chairpersons? We have from Sweden, we have from Norway, and we have from Spain. So it's still very Eurocentric. And yet, if you think about it, 60% of the population of the world belong to Asia. So why are we not represented in the largest federations? Next slide, please. My master thesis proposal is on culture-rooted barriers to gender equality in sport in Asia. And these are 4 things that I identified. There's so much more in my paper proposal, but let me talk about these 4 aspects of our culture in Asia: sexism, tokenism, prostitution, and female bribes. So sexism is something I have been subjected to. You know, they have words like, what does she know? She's just a girl. Or we can't have a woman lead over us. And these were conversations that I received in my investigation. You are free. This is, you know, they resisted the freedom that they had wanted for over 2 decades. We also encountered sexism during the Tokyo 2020, wherein the regional president of the OCOG didn't want women to speak because he thought that we women, we speak too much. Sexism. Tokenism, an effort of FIFA to make sure that there's women representation, is that they have a rule of having women in the executive council. Otherwise, that council will not have any representation in FIFA. So in my country, this is how that rule is implemented. They have an executive council, and it's only for men. And if you are a woman and you want to run for leadership, there's what they call female executive. Female executive. That's it. If you're a female, you cannot run with the executive council. Also, if you look at the leadership in the Asian AFC, Asian Football Confederation, yes, they have a woman. Unless this has been updated, it's just a very, very small portion, just to fulfill the rule of FIFA. So it's not a sincere representation, space for giving female representation. So the next one is prostitution, and this is a very painful part of Asian culture. And this is something that came out in my investigation in my country, wherein the prize money is so small, but this National Federation president brings in prostitutes. No one wanted to attest to this situation because they would incriminate themselves, I mean, these men. But the parents of the athlete who died because of lack of safety check, they attested. The boy was just 16 years old, and this National Federation president wanted to make fun when he knows that the boys have not been or are not de-virginized. He would have them laid, and this is with even the parents around, and they feel they have no choice. But this boy resisted and reported to his father right away. And a deeper level of this prostitution is how they use women for match fixing. And this is in the book of Dr. Declan Hill, The Fix, which was his PhD paper for Oxford, for his PhD in sociology, wherein referees, leaders of government bodies, they agree to match fixing because they're offered female brides. So this is a situation, the whole general Asia situation. So if there are any questions, you can ask me. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much, Ruby. It's probably not the happiest ending for our talk today, but I don't think there's any questions in the chat. So I have a couple of questions for each of you, and they're really about what happens next or what needs to happen. So maybe I can work backwards. And for you, Ruby, you know, now living in Europe and kind of looking in from outside, what has to change? You know, do you have any hope of change? Can you see any spaces or possibilities for things to shift in terms of these gender dynamics and these terrible practices that are underway?
Not from within the national level, because the culture, you're blind to the culture. You think this is how it is. You gotta come in from outside, so and be an authority. One reason I have pursued education, and if I am blessed, I would like to pursue it further to a PhD level, is so I can become an expert and an authority, and the gender doesn't matter. You know, when I speak, they know that there's force. In fact, when I was being questioned by a football association whether I or not I know how to manage an event, it was very trivial, because of course I know. When you know there is power in knowledge, how do we solve this situation if we're just coming from within? So we really need to grow from out of our context, which is Asia, strengthen our influence, our profile, and come with a network of international leaders who will be by your side, so that we're not just one person fighting, and I'm not anymore a voice in the wilderness. I have a global network on different levels who will be with me once I'm ready to come back and speak to my nation.
And do you think, I mean, so essentially what you're saying is that the international federations have an incredibly important role to play, and that might be the level where the work needs to happen if it's going to then, you see it only happening as a filter down or a pressure from above.
Like an eagle. Yeah.
Well,
In fact,
it's
I'm sorry. Yeah, you know, the largest bird in the world is a Philippine eagle in terms of length and spread of wings. And so that's how I symbolize myself, Philippine eagle. I'm gonna calm down. And in fact, the other name for Philippine eagle, because it's so huge, is monkey eating eagle. Yeah. It can really grab those well, the personalities that really need to be removed, and we need law enforcement to bridge itself with sport, because there is sport crimes, there are sport crimes and organized crimes in sport, and you cannot anymore just do it on an ethical level. It has to have the teeth of the law. So I believe that's something that we need. There's a gap, and they're moving towards that. The group of Copenhagen play the game. They're trying to form a world organization that will stand for sport integrity and anti-corruption. And I'm involved behind the scenes in that. I really want to be involved in world governance for sport, so that we can address this situation. It's too deeply ingrained.
Thank you very much. I think this segues into a question I had for Andrea, actually, which is, again, same kind of question. What still needs to happen to make, integrity just something we don't even think about? It's just so taken for granted as part of sport. And I think the question for you might be similar to what I'm thinking about for Ruby, is this a generational thing? Do we have to wait for these men who are, embedded in the older sexist attitudes and maybe that, running their own empires? So maybe I'll go to Andrea first, and then Ruby, maybe you could come back in. And also in Tumba, do you think that it's a generational thing? And is there hope in the people coming up? So Andrea, what do you think?
On my end, thanks, Tony. I don't think that's an issue of generation. I think it's an issue of leadership, education, and really kind of putting yourself and advocating for these issues, and not only advocating and educating, but also have this law enforcement and other mechanisms. It took in harassment and abuse, it took Larry Nassar's scandals for us to shake us up and move forward really dramatically. There's lots happened already where we have seen not integrity in sports. So I don't think we have to wait for some huge scandal. We just have to, organization like ours should be given more platform, more voice. We need to be given funding to play a global role, because there are countries which situation is not very good, as we just heard, and we need to support good developments and good trends. So Women in Sports International is phenomenal, and it has phenomenal position. It just has to give them funding and support to reach out many countries around the world. I think we can make a difference, and also the other organizations can make a difference. And also that concept which we see a lot nowadays, which is train the trainer, to train people in leadership, in equality, in human rights. And that's not just, it doesn't come naturally for some people or some situations. So I think tone from the top. Again, if we have enlightened leaders, then people will follow. If we have corrupt leaders, as we have heard, for examples on this webinar, because people will also follow. So I think strong leadership, education, and empowerment for leaders and organizations like ours. So I'm optimistic. I'm not saying we have to wait and sit and wait. I think we should, as a society, as a sport leaders, we have to take action. And so that's my view, Tony.
So it seems like both you and Ruby agree that we need to have the weight of the law, or the weight of people who can enforce things behind this, in order to really be the stick, maybe not the carrot, but the stick.
And that's why I'm thinking, the role of these legal directors in these organizations, role of lawyers being opened, being ethical, and so on is so important. Because then who is going to enforce for these organizations? It has to be someone, the enforcement from outside comes with difficulties. But if you have a leadership, and if you have independent lawyers, counsel, who steer and advise leaders properly, I think we can see, I see it as a good way, at least, to move to the next stage.
Ruby, do you want to wait?
Yeah. Okay.
I'm sorry. You can go ahead.
Okay. Yes, sports is becoming a big business, and unfortunately, with that, it's a ego issues, which most of the time we see it on our male counterparts. But it's not to say that all men are like that. There are men who are liberated, men who accept change, men who want to see women in leadership. And I totally agree with Andre that it's an issue of leadership, because of if the leadership is not liberated, obviously all these things are going to come into place. And that's where what Tony, you were saying about possibly issues of enforcement. And I think one thing that I've seen even in our country is the fact that when there are policies and monitoring of those policies, whether they're implemented or not, things tend to happen. So even those ones who don't want to change, they end up actually getting a way to change. So I think we need to have these organizations that could assist us in that area. One of the organizations that it's helping a lot in South Africa is the Ombudsman, which when you feel that you had been treated unfairly and you are not happy with how things are run, you then go to the Ombudsman, and there you would then get your legal support and deal with the issues that are bothering you, whether it's issues around integrity. They can actually deal with those issues. So I totally agree. We definitely need such a structure at an international level. I don't know, SIGA, it is that structure, or SIGA can make sure that they have more SIGAs in all regions of the world, so that in Africa we should know where do we go when we have issues around integrity. I don't know, but I think we just need a structure that could assist us to address these issues and to make sure that there's enforcement. And if there's people are not changing, what will be the penalties?
Thank you. Ruby?
Yeah, I don't think it's a generational thing. In my experience, when I was organizing the Kunifa Asia Cup, the one who was putting me in question was a 25-year-old. Probably he's 26 by now. And he was mansplaining. So I think it's bigger than an aspect of generation, but culture. So his cultural context. There's also a learning curve. And while I was going through all of these hindrances as I was leading the organization of the Asia Cup, which took a period of 10 months, I would get encouragement from the Kunifa president, the global president, Per Anders Lin. He would say he used the phrase, the best revenge is success. So, meaning show them what you've got. And yeah, it was successful. And I think that's the best way to silence those who don't believe in our capacity just because we are women. Just show them what we've got. There's also, as I mentioned, that learning curve. So as we show them what we've got and be successful in the field, I think we should also teach. I would like to speak more. This is the first time that I'm going on a global platform to speak as a whistleblower. But I really want to teach, to empower people and to unshackle the chains which begins in their mind, to renew, to transform their mindset, both men and women. It's not just the men, the women themselves. They think they can't do it because they're women. No, we can. Nothing stops us. This body is a container. It's our spirit, it's our substance, it's our skill that are most important. Let's show them what we've got.
Great. Thank you, Ruby. Ntambe, I was thinking, as looking at all the many roles that you've served, and also thinking about WomenSport International and other women's groups, what role do the women's sports organizations have in terms of supporting people who were in, say, your position in Ntambe, where you knew things were, you ended up not being able to run for a position, but you were kind of fighting that fight somewhat on your own. And so I'm thinking, often it's sort of like support the one woman to do it, but do women's sports organizations have a role to play to become that, not just a support place, but a place that sort of actively gets out there and really supports and pushes for change? So I'd like to start with Ntambe, and then maybe open it up to the rest of the WomenSport International people who are online.
I think you're quite correct, because of I felt like I'm fighting a battle alone. And even if people were aware about the issue, I was not feeling like there's pressure groups from outside dealing with the issue that I was going through. And I think one thing that is lacking in women's groups and leading women's it's actually a pressure group, a group that would say not in our name, and challenge the issue, and make sure that the issue is addressed correctly, and even actually possibly call you and give you more support, more ideas on how to address the issue. And I think that's one area that I think it's lacking. I think we are focusing more on moving forward, but we are not addressing issues that are today affecting women. And I will tell you one of my observations. Women are becoming more empowered and more resourceful in organizations, and their credentials are becoming very good because of we were not in those positions. So we are learning a lot. We are studying. We are doing whatever. We are getting as much as information as we can in order for us to belong. And unfortunately, most of our men counterparts are not doing that. So we end up having credentials which are a little bit higher than theirs, and that I think tends to threaten them. And I've seen that in most of the organizations that have, even now in cricket. And I think we need some form of support service. And I don't know what would be the answer, but there is a need for support for those women at that level, and that's why I'm thinking about a pressure group, and I don't know of any pressure group at the moment. I think all of us now are focusing more on behind the scene advocacy, and not advocating more publicly out there.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, is that there is a need for organizations to be publicly supporting, because the behind the scenes is fine. I mean, you need that support as an individual, but the culture is not going to change unless lots of voices are out there saying this is wrong.
Yeah. Because one of the things that I was feeling like I'm fighting a battle that it doesn't affect any other woman. But when they were calling me and they were starting to tell me their stories, I then realized that more women are experiencing such behaviors. But unfortunately, people are not being out there addressing those issues, talking about them, supporting a woman who is treated and say, no, you don't do that. So there is the need to support. And I'm asking myself, and I was actually talking to women because we were doing a leadership training some few weeks back. And most of the women were saying, we will definitely want to say something, but we're afraid of our positions. We're afraid of our jobs. I might lose my job. So, and then unfortunately for me, I didn't have, I was not tied to a position. I was more on doing the right thing than having a position. And I don't know how many other women would be able to do that.
And so the advantage is, if there is a group or an organization that speaks, that actually protects the individuals.
That's it. Yeah.
Would someone else from WSI like to speak to that? I don't know if Carol's still on, or Diane. And I might take myself off the screen now, and if I can do that, and then we'll be able to see everybody else. Diane, what do you think about the importance of groups like WSI or other groups, so that we can speak for others? because of the dangers of an individual standing up and speaking out, because, Ruby, those dangers, and Tumbe's, just too strong-willed to worry about them too much. But obviously there are lots of other women who didn't, who didn't feel safe. And so organizations like WSI, is that a role that we don't?
I think it's a role that we have played, particularly when there was the situation in Japan with the chairman making comments about women talking too much and so on. And we addressed that as a group. We collaborated with other women's organizations, prepared public letters, sent the letters to the leadership in Japan, and waited for some results. So as a result, we've built a strong relationship with some of the women's organizations in Japan, and being able to provide them with speakers on different issues that are affecting them. So we do take that advocacy role when there is that one was very public, so we were able to, we felt we had no choice really as a women's organization not to comment. When there's individual issues like this, we're not in the role, we're not a legal entity, so we have to be careful how we advocate. But we can talk about these issues, and we can take an individual's situation as we have today and talk about them and demonstrate to women ways that they can move forward and be supportive. We've written letters to different organizations to support them when we've been asked. Also, so many situations of harassment and abuse, when the situation comes forward, if it's in a criminal investigation, it's difficult for us to be in a position to say too much, other than take an educational role and talk about these kinds of issues in general and what's needed. So I'm not sure if our role at this time is to actually be one who deals with individual situations. That's not what we are standing for. We're advocating for the changes in governance. As Andrea has very clearly said, this is so important. And so we can use these individual situations to help to show that this is real. These situations are real, and we can collect them. But we don't have the capacity at this time, or the funding, to be able to manage individual situations. And I don't know, maybe Andrea, you would have a comment on that as well, from a legal perspective.
I fully agree what you said, Dan. We are at the stage we are advocating on global scales, and try also to support people with the measures like you mentioned, that letter which went out. But we are more on, I sense we are more on educational base right now, but we can train the trainers, we can do things like that. Individual case management, I think it's right now beyond the scope, but who knows?
Yeah,
That's my feeling too. Yeah.
But maybe Carol particularly, who's been involved in gender issues her whole career, would maybe have an opportunity to comment if she's still with us.
Well, maybe before Carol comes in, I guess my what I was thinking about was not so much the individual advocacy, but that it's much safer for WomenSport International to come out with a statement, so that those of us who are members of the organization are not individually at risk in the way that Ntumbe was or Ruby has been. So there's something about an organization taking a stand, that something about that group. So you're speaking as an entity rather than as an individual, that maybe is really powerful. And we need to think about how we maximize that to support people who are in difficult situations.
Yeah.
If I may add, I think the world needs whistleblower protection, especially in my case. I'm not rich, I'm not powerful, and in this situation, I'm not a man. So it's so easy to bring me down, to kill me. I walk in the streets, I don't have a car. I'm just a simple person who loves the country and who's standing up for what's right. I didn't even realize there was a term called sport integrity until I joined SIGA's first webinar in 2020. So I was just calling it righteousness in sport, just doing what's right. And I was really risking my life, just walking in the street. I tried to reach out, and so there is no way to extricate a whistleblower from her country and give her protection. It doesn't exist. I've gone to the National Bureau of Investigation. They said, you're not the victim, so we can't do anything. I couldn't even get any protection from the government. And certain parts of the government were with this corruption and the National Olympic Committee. So where do I go in my country? It's just really serendipitous that I got this scholarship. I went below the radar from being public. I even had a press conference and going below the radar, but I couldn't stay silent for too long. My conscience wouldn't let me just be afraid. I don't want to be afraid. I don't want to live afraid. I want to be free. I want to be courageous. But how many people, whistleblower, would have a chance like I had, but I got a scholarship. So I really hope that this opportunity that life has given me would give me the voice to shake some structures and let them see this is what's happening in this part of the world. Please help the women who are trying to speak up, who are trying to protest against the abuse of men on their person. And not just men. I was speaking up for minors, also for children. So it's women and minors in sport.
Just to
So
come.
sorry, Ntumbe. Nadimi's just asked, does WSI have a formal relation with the IOC? I'll kick that one back to you, Diane.
Yeah, we have an informal relationship with the IOC, not a formal written agreement. And many of our board members are advisors. They're sitting on some of the commissions. We have people on the medical commission. We have people who have helped. Some of our board members have been engaged helping with the development of the IOC's consensus statement on harassment and abuse, on sexual differences, and on a couple of the other areas on gender. We help them with the development of their gender strategy. So we've been engaged quite extensively since I would say 1995 with when WomenSport International formed the very first task force, probably in the sports sector, on harassment and abuse. And after they put out a position statement and some sort of principles, the IOC did contact some of these board members and have been engaging them ever since. So yeah, to say we have a formal agreement, no, not as WomenSport International, but yes, an informal relationship where our board members are regularly sitting on areas to assist them in managing and preparing their strong statements. I hope that that's answered, and maybe Carol, could add to that, because she's involved since the beginning of WSI. But I think that that's where we're at with the IOC. And we even advocate against with that issues if we feel we're going in a different direction. We don't sit back just because they engage us. We do say, you know, you need to be looking at this, but we don't try to embarrass them necessarily. We just make sure that the public knows that the IOC, as the leader sport, need to be looking at these issues. And of course they are very much trying to move forward to the best of their ability, and they get the experts. So go ahead, Carol. Sorry.
No. Thanks for the opportunity to chime in here. I would just add, I think it's almost like goes without saying that research and evidence collection is probably one of the strong suits that WSI offers to the sport ecosystem. Many of these topics are so fraught with difficulty and shame and embarrassment. The truth is shoved to the side, and what is needed is the light of accurate information. So, for example, with the harassment and abuse issue, many of the people that are in WSI have shined the light and shown the extensiveness of the issues, and I think that's what this program is talking about today. But evidence is a great, and Ruby has mentioned many times, education, being educated and coming to a topic from a position of being informed. And I think I've always been a believer in the concept of organizations taking the leading role rather than an individual, because it's so easy to zero in. The opposing forces can zero in on an individual, but it's more difficult, more powerful, I think, to dismiss the message if it's coming from an organization.
Yeah.
Thank you, Carol. And I see we have Aminata from the, I imagine, Women in Sport Commission in Sierra Leone. I don't know if you have any questions for us or anything you'd like to add from your context. Okay. I think I've run out of questions.
No,
So
I just
maybe
to go back to what you were suggesting and just give an example that we do as Women in Sport South Africa. Whenever that's any woman in sport who is challenged, we don't keep quiet. So when we see it on social media, we put our position of support. And we do that also even if when we see something that is happening internationally. If it's something that affects women, we do put a statement on our support without getting into details of the issue, but at least that person would know there is a structure that is supporting me. And actually, we even helped one of the girls who was sexually harassed in football, and she started feeling that she's getting support from somewhere, and follow up the issue, which she would have not follow up the issue if she didn't have support. So it's not about getting involved in the case. It's an issue of showing support. I think that support, you would never know how far it will help that person.
If I may.
Yeah. Sorry, I think that's one of the things that WSI has been quite strong at, is making sure that these issues are recognized, and when they come up, we do address them often. We have such a strong social media, where people like Carol, who's here with us today, and Ruby herself with us, they post these issues and demonstrate and try and push that these are highlighted. Be aware, these are the issues that are happening out there. And when it's required, where we do make a statement, and we bring in other international organizations to sign on to these statements as well. So we've been quite strong in doing that. I think since the organization started.
If I may add, yeah, my heart was pounding fast when I was listening to you, because it will really make a big difference if there's a letter from WomenSport International and the IOC, for example, that I will bring to the National Olympic Committee. Then they finally will sit down with me and I'll talk and I'll show them their own evidence that this man's general election was rigged. Their own evidence, which I got. You see, for 5 months, I was trying to call the National Olympic Committee. They were not minding me. And that's why I worked behind the scenes for a change of government. But then these people are still around. They went back to power in the National Olympic Committee. So, but if it's coming from the IOC, a global organization, they'll take notice. So that's why my heart is pounding fast. I think this is something I would need. You have seen, you can read my evidence-based reports. It's all there, hard copy and everything. I mean, I got the documents that showed that this guy is just fake. He's now operating using ultra-virus document from the National Olympic Committee. And they're not listening to me. So yes, a letter would really make a difference to help people like myself, be fighting on a national level.
Yeah, and it's complicated again because we don't tend to get involved in individual cases. But if an individual case is representing a bigger issue, I think that's the place that WSI can serve, is to then maybe use you as an example, but surface the bigger issue. Because I think what Carol said is really important to keep in mind, is that we are a research-driven organization, and that we try to base, because many of us are academics, and so we base our arguments and our position papers and the IOC and on the basis of this is what rigorous evidence shows. Ruby, again, in a way, you'd be in an odd position in relation to WSI, because yours is an individual case, yet it's and so is Ntumbe's, but at the same time they're representative of something much bigger. And that would be the level at which we might get involved, of saying this is not isolated, this, we've got evidence that this is happening everywhere, and that kind of support might actually be useful to you.
Yes,
yeah, I can just say that I have heard many whistleblowers over the years in the area of harassment and abuse in sport. I have met them. I know them personally. I heard them on many conferences, and the journey you are going through, it's a universal journey when you feel alone and so on. So it is also, if people are ahead of their time, and maybe what we are hearing here is that this integrity in sports and everything is something we have to zoom in more closely, because in harassment and abuse now I see big embracement of whistleblowers and lots of kind of support which wasn't there maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago. So you are putting a kind of like a trend, your trend issues where they are going, and it's just I can say that being ahead of time is sometimes difficult, but people have to kind of just tell their stories, and the integrity and what we are listening here about this week of integrity is so important, because it is moving the things for the future.
Yeah, in this case, it's systemic. It's using the IOC system for a front
Yeah.
in the sport federation is actually operating to promote and facilitate prostitution and child abuse.
I think I agree with Adria again, and possibly what we need to do as a research-based organization is to research around integrity in leadership in sport, and possibly that issue might bring up a lot of other areas that need to be addressed. Yeah, so I don't know how to formulate it, but I think the issue around integrity in sports leadership need to be researched.
Professor Nassif has a comment. Tony?
Yes, I saw that. Would you like to talk to us about that, Professor Nassif, to tell us a little bit? He's just put in the message. Excellent. About how they
Hello, everyone.
There you go. Hi.
You can hear me? Hi. Nice to see this advocacy group working so hard, as usual. Yesterday we had also our panel during the SIGA week, so I will allow myself to speak about that because also I'm a researcher basically, but the advantage of a think tank is to try to use research and try to apply it into policy matters.
Yeah.
So building the bridge between academic research and policy making. So this is the role of a think tank. We will be sponsored by, I'm going to be very transparent about it. We'll be sponsored by a company, by a sport nutrition company. So it's not the university money. And we did this on purpose because we want to have funding to be able to have case studies that would be able to be applied on the field, at a policy level. So if you feel that a think tank in a university that is based on scientific research will help research findings to be able to be applied on a policy level, I will be more than welcome to contribute to that. I will be more than motivated to contribute to that. I myself volunteered for a couple of years coaching the Lebanese women futsal national team. And I'm not as engaged as all of you, but I know what are the difficulties. So research is very interesting, but in social science, because sport management is kind of part of social science. If it doesn't go at a policy level, it can be frustrating on the long run. So, and we need to make things correctly. That's why a think tank has a good role in doing that. This is my opinion. And by the way, the private companies will sponsor this. It's called Cell Nutrition Sport. Soon we'll have the announcement about it. But Cell Nutrition Sport have a program for women called Equal but Different, because physiologically women have different characteristics. So they have a program that is sensitive to the development of women's sport. So this is just for info. I already participated, thanks to Miss Ruby. I already participated to one of the WSI seminars. It was an online one, I think in spring 2022, to really calculate difference in terms of popularity between the women elite sport. By the way, I have also published, sorry, I'm talking a lot now. I have also published a paper on the disparity in women elite athlete in the Middle East. I will share now on the group the publication. Perhaps you can use it as well. So these are just some ideas. If you're interested, we can use them and we can proceed. This is just this.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I would love to see your article because I teach sociology of sport. So would be, but yeah, I think in one of the struggles that we have is getting the funding to be able to really ramp up that application of all the knowledge that is generated by WomenSport International members and other researchers. So I hope yours is successful.
Thank you very much.
I really appreciate your comments as well, because this is one of the things that that as a practitioner, I'm not a well, I do a lot of research and I partner with researchers, but a lot of my work is actually the implementation, taking the research and advocating and pushing for governance. And I've worked a lot in Vietnam and in Southern Africa, making these changes to the point where we've been able to have a regional, 10 countries buy into a gender action plan, where they've bought into having gender roundtables within their ministries of sport, where they've where they've agreed to develop gender policies, where they've changed safeguarding as a requirement at games, regional games, where they have to have safeguarding officers. It's now accepted by all 10 ministers of sport in the region. So, but we couldn't do that without the data to demonstrate. We all know it's happening, but when in 2014 we did a full study in terms of the prevalence of abuse and harassment in for example, Zambia, we were able to get all the ministers of sport to agree that this was happening in their countries as well, and they started to take it seriously. Now, if you saw Matambi's statistics at the beginning, we did a study in 2013 and 14 on the gender leadership in Southern Africa at the time. And in government, it was quite low. It was 27%, I think. And of all the areas that improved between 2013 and 2022 was government, where now they're at 41% with women in on committees and in leadership in government. But if we looked at the sports or governance of sport, but if we look at the sports sector itself, it has not trickled down yet. It in most cases stayed the same, or was in football in particular, it was lower. So so we had, with all the work that FIFA is pushing on gender, there's still all these issues where we did not see a change, even with all the education. So I think what you're doing is really needed, and it would be nice if we could be involved in some way. So we should have a discussion in the future and thank you for sharing your email.
Thank you also to Professor Nassif, because I met him during a Sport Integrity Week 2020 as well. And he was reading all of my questions and all that. And he was interested because I was speaking about whistleblower. I kept on saying, what's your protection for a whistleblower back in those days? And so he wanted to hear my case, and his advice was for me to pursue my study all the way to PhD. He was the one who, back in those days, I just had a bachelor's degree. And he said, then you become an expert and people will listen to you. And that's how you can begin systemic change. So here, and just another trivia, he was the one who sent me the link for the Erasmus Mundus scholarship. Thank you, Professor Nassif.
Yes, that's interesting. I also want to talk about that the individuals in WomenSport International on an individual basis have done a lot behind the scene as personal support, not under the name of WomenSport International, but because when individuals approach them with an issue, they take the time behind the scene and help the individual to the best of their ability. And I really have to thank Carol Oglesby for being one of these people who, I think there are a lot of women who maybe haven't expressed exactly the support that they've been given, but on an individual basis, she has provided advice and direction, which with her background in psychology and sociology has probably been invaluable to people. And this is all just given as a person who freely, outside of her work and her efforts, has done this. So, and I think there are a number of our board members who their research and their work is a passion and a commitment, a life commitment. It's not a career move. It's a life commitment. And so we're so fortunate in this organization to have people like that. So
yeah, and maybe you can mention that Carrie is just getting recognized on national level, and you are right now there to mark the occasion, Dan. That was for the efforts. She has been a part of this organization also from very beginning, correct?
Yes, she was one of Dr. Kari Fasting from Norway, one of our founding members. She's just going to receive the highest award from Norway, the King's Award, and she'll be given that on Tuesday this week, Tuesday the 12th of September. So because WomenSport International initiated with the University of Sports Science the submission, to speak on behalf of WomenSport International. So it's quite an honor. So we're the members of our team and the work and efforts of these people, like Carol and Kari, have been there since 1994. How many people stay in a volunteer position all that time? It's really commendable. So I think young women like yourself, Ruby, you have strong mentors and people behind you. So, and it's nice to hear that Professor Nassif is one of them as well. So
I also want
all
to,
the best.
Yeah, I want to acknowledge Dr. Oglesby because I got to know WomenSport International through her. And in one very low point wherein I was checking my name because I was a published author, journalist. Every now and then I just check my online presence, and it took 3 years before I realized these people that I investigated, they did a cyber libel against me. And it just broke my heart because all I wanted was to do what's right for the country. And I shared it with Dr. Oglesby, and she said words that were so empowering to me, and so which made me continue the fight. Thank you, Dr. Carol.
Carol, do you want to respond?
Well, I just appreciate the kind words. It's lovely to hear. I had to laugh when Diana was talking about 1994. I was an old lady in advocacy in 1994, so it's been a long go. But anyway, it's been more fun and empowering to me than anything else. So thank you for the kind words.
We appreciate you, Carol. You are doing a lot of work for most of us. Thank you so much.
Right. Well, thank you, everyone.
Yes.
Ruby?
I'm sorry. Yeah, she's doing a lot of work behind the scenes, and also.
Yeah.
And so maybe that's one of the themes that's come up today, is that thinking about the difference between behind the scenes and then being public about it. And so I think probably we need to be operating at both levels, because that one interaction with one person can boost your spirits, give you confidence, change your life. But at the same time, there's a need for the public support, so that you know that So to the rest of the world, you're not alone, that there are other
Yeah.
people who are in your court, so to speak. So I would like to thank our three fabulous speakers, Ntambe, Ruby, and Andrea, for sharing diverse experiences about what it's like to try to be a leader and a change maker in sport and work around the issues of integrity. We're very lucky to have this really global perspective shared with us today. So if you know where the reaction button is, I'd like to give everybody a clap and say thank you very much. And yes, hopefully those of you who have come along as well will be happy to join us with future webinars. We do offer sometimes 3 to 4 a year, and we publicize them on the WSI website and through other channels. So and thank you for coming from Sierra Leone. We're really happy to have such a global audience. It's been fantastic. And I think that is where we will finish.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.